10-year-old Sarah's innocent laughter filled the old sedan as she showed her grandpa the castle on her bright tablet. Seconds later, a racist cop's bullet shattered the peace, and with it, the fragile anonymity of a decorated black veteran whose past was a carefully buried war zone. The humid afternoon air of New Liberty City hung heavy, the sun a diffused orange disk. Inside the worn but reliable 1995 Ford Fairmont, Marcus Washington, 68, listened to his granddaughter Sarah's bright chatter. Lines of a long, hard life were etched into his dark, kind face, a face that often looked more tired and pitiful than anything else. His simple, faded polo shirt and old trousers were the uniform of a man content with invisibility. Sarah, perched in the back seat, held up her colorful kid's tablet, its screen alive with a blue-turreted castle. "Look, Grandpa. I gave the princess a dragon." Her grandmother, Eleanor, smiled from the passenger seat, her hand resting on Marcus's arm. "That's beautiful, sweet pea." The idyllic moment was obliterated by the sudden, aggressive blare of a police siren and flashing lights. Officer Miller, young, white, with a restless arrogance in his eyes, gestured sharply for Marcus to pull over. His partner, Ramirez, younger still and looking uneasy, hung back. "Now what's all this?" Marcus murmured, his voice a low, calm rumble as he guided the Fairmont to the curb. He exuded a stillness that was often mistaken for frailty. Miller approached, his hand already near his holstered Glock. "License and registration. Now." His voice was sharp, impatient. "And you in the back, what's that you got?" "It's my tablet, sir," Sarah piped up, innocent and a little scared. "Just his paperwork, officer," Marcus said, his movements slow, deliberate as he reached for the glove compartment. He saw the suspicion in Miller's eyes, the way they flicked over his old car, his black skin, his age. "Problem, officer?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight. "Just stay out of this, ma'am," Miller snapped, his attention fixed on Sarah. "You, kid. Let me see that thing." Slowly. Sarah, confused and wanting to comply, lifted her bright tablet, angling it so the officer could see her drawing. The sun caught the screen, sending a brief, sharp glint towards Miller. That was all it took. "Gun!" Miller screamed, his face contorting in a mask of what looked like fear, but felt like something uglier. He didn't pause, didn't ask. He drew and fired. The shot was a deafening crack in the close confines of the car. Sarah cried out, a thin, high-pitched sound of shock and pain, and slumped forward. The tablet clattered to the floor, its screen now dark. Eleanor's shriek was a raw, tearing sound. "My baby! You shot my baby!" Marcus didn't shout. He didn't move for a beat, his weathered face unreadable. Then, he turned, his eyes, moments ago reflecting grandfatherly affection, now glinting with an ancient, chilling light. It was a look that didn't register immediate rage, but something far deeper, a cold, calculating stillness that was infinitely more terrifying. He was out of the car with a fluid economy of motion that belied his age and unassuming appearance. "Jesus, Miller, what the hell?" Ramirez finally stammered, rushing up, his own gun still holstered, his face ashen. "It was a kid's tablet, man. A bright pink, for God's sake." Miller was already babbling, she pointed it. "It flashed. I thought it was a weapon. I had to react." His voice was shrill, defensive. Marcus ignored them both. He opened the rear door. Sarah was conscious, whimpering, clutching her shoulder where a dark stain was rapidly blooming on her light blue t-shirt. Blood seeped between her small fingers. "Grandpa," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror and pain. "I'm here, sweet pea," Marcus said, his voice incredibly gentle, yet underscored by a resonance that vibrated with controlled power. He carefully gathered her into his arms, his large, worn hand surprisingly tender. He looked up then, his gaze locking onto Miller's. It was not a look of grief, not yet. It was the look of a dormant volcano just before it blows, cold, contained, and utterly lethal. Miller flinched, taking an involuntary step back. Eleanor was already on the phone, her voice breaking as she screamed for an ambulance. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, but for Marcus, the world had narrowed to the tiny, bleeding child in his arms and the panicked, guilty face of the man who had put her there. The quiet life he had so painstakingly built lay shattered, and something he had buried long ago, something dangerous and disciplined, began to stir in the depths of his soul. The harsh fluorescent lights of Mercy General's emergency room seemed to amplify Eleanor's quiet sobs. Sarah had been rushed into surgery. The bullet, thankfully, had missed vital organs but caused significant damage to her shoulder and collarbone. Marcus stood like an old oak tree in a storm, his worn face a mask of stoic control, but his eyes held a deep, simmering fire. He hadn't said more than a dozen words since the shooting, his silence more unnerving than any outburst. A uniformed officer, a nervous rookie named Peterson, approached him with a clipboard. "Mr. Washington, I need to get a more detailed statement." Marcus looked at him, not unkindly, but with an absolute finality in his gaze. "My granddaughter is fighting for her life, son. That's the only statement that matters right now." He offered his name, Sarah's name, and Eleanor's. When Peterson pressed for his social security number, his address, Marcus simply said, "Later." "Not now." There was no room for argument in his tone. Peterson retreated, muttering to his partner about the old man being in shock. At the 3rd Precinct, Officer Miller, stripped of his gun and badge pending investigation, was weaving a frantic tale of self-defense to Captain Eva Rostova. Rostova, a sharp, experienced officer in her late 40s, listened with a tightening jaw. Miller's story was full of holes. A 10-year-old girl, Miller. With a pink drawing tablet. You perceive that as a lethal threat? The glare, Captain. She moved it fast. I had to make a split-second decision. Miller blustered, sweat shining on his face. Officer Ramirez's testimony was far less certain, painting a picture of Miller's quick escalation and his own shocked hesitation. "Run full background checks on everyone," Rostova ordered her desk sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Henderson. "Parents, grandparents, the works. I want to know who these people are." Eleanor and Sarah's records came back clean, unremarkable. Then Henderson ran Marcus Washington, born 1957, with the limited information Marcus had provided. The precinct's primary database churned, then froze. An error message popped up, access denied. File integrity sealed, code Nightingale. Henderson frowned. He'd never seen that code. He tried the state-level system. It returned a harsher warning, level 7 clearance required. Attempt logged. Stand down. He escalated to a federal portal, using a shared interagency access key. This time, the screen went blank for a second before a single, chilling line appeared in stark red letters, Alpha Tier, Eyes Only. Ghost Protocol active. Do not proceed. Captain, Henderson called out, his voice strained. You better come see this. I think we have a problem. Rostova stared at the messages, a cold dread seeping into her. Ghost Protocol. Nightingale. These weren't law enforcement terms. They smelled of deep state, of covert operations so buried they were myths. Who the hell was Marcus Washington? She felt a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with the shooting itself, and everything to do with the victim's quiet, watchful grandfather. Back in the dim quiet of the ICU, hours later, Sarah was stable but sleeping fitfully. Eleanor had finally cried herself into an exhausted doze in the uncomfortable visitor's chair. Marcus sat beside his granddaughter's bed, his gaze unwavering. He reached into the pocket of his worn trousers and pulled out an old, tarnished Zippo lighter. It wasn't a smoker's habit, he hadn't touched a cigarette in nearly 50 years. He opened the lid with a familiar click. Closed it. Clack. He repeated it. Click. clack. Then, 2 quick snaps, click-clack. Click-clack. A precise, rhythmic sequence. 1 long, 2 short. He performed the metallic whisper 3 times, a silent, coded message sent out into the ether, a language he thought he'd forgotten, for ears he wasn't sure still listened. Alastair Finch, the precinct's elderly civilian archivist, a man who preferred dusty ledgers to digital databases, was Rostova's last resort. "Al," she'd said, "see if Nightingale or Ghost Protocol rings any bells from the old physical cross-references. Pre-digital stuff. Anything related to irregular military liaisons from the 70s or 80s. Finch, intrigued, had shuffled off to the sub-basement archives. He returned hours later, a single, brittle manila folder in his trembling hand. "Captain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I found something. It's extraordinary. And terrifying." He laid out a heavily redacted document, an internal affairs memo from 1979, detailing a liaison with an unnamed, unsanctioned military unit operating outside normal command structures during the late Vietnam era and its aftermath. The unit was referred to only by a symbol, a stylized bird in silent flight. The memo mentioned their operatives were phantoms, experts in asymmetric resolution. Attached was a faded note from a long-retired chief of detectives, unit designation, Nightingale Sings. Primary field operative call sign, Spectre. Known for extreme efficiency. All records ordered expunged by a Mr. Jones from Langley. This is the only unofficial trace. Finch then produced another slip of paper. An ER nurse mentioned to the officer at the hospital that the old man, Washington, was fiddling with an old lighter. Clicking it. She said it was an odd, rhythmic pattern, 1 long click, then 2 short ones. Repeated. Rostova felt the air leave her lungs. 1 long, 2 short. Spectre. Nightingale. Marcus Washington was more than just a grieving grandfather. He was a ghost from a past the government had tried to erase. And he was sending signals. The almost inaudible clicks from Marcus's old Zippo lighter, a language of ghosts, rippled through unseen channels. They weren't intercepted by satellites or decoded by algorithms. They were recognized by a handful of men and women scattered across the country, living lives of quiet obscurity, their pasts buried deeper than any government secret. In a cluttered pawn shop in El Paso, Texas, 70-year-old Miguel Padre Hernandez, a man whose gentle smile and knowledge of saints' medals made him a neighborhood fixture, was examining a tarnished silver crucifix. Suddenly, the shop's old ham radio, a relic he kept in the back for nostalgia, crackled faintly. It wasn't voices, but a specific, almost subliminal pulse of static, keyed to a frequency no one else used, dash, dot dot, dash, dot dot, dash, dot dot. Padre's hand stilled. His eyes, usually soft, sharpened with an intensity that would have shocked his customers. He hadn't heard that sequence since a humid night in a Laotian jungle 45 years ago. It was Spectre's emergency beacon. He slowly put down the crucifix. Deep in the Louisiana bayou, 75-year-old Delia, Shadow Woman, Baptiste, renowned locally for her herbal remedies and unsettlingly accurate pronouncements, was tending her small garden. A particular species of marsh bird, one she hadn't seen in years, landed on her fence post and let out a distinct 3-note call, paused, then repeated it twice more. It was a call that only members of their old unit would recognize as a non-natural mimicry, a signal. Delia straightened up, her back surprisingly spry, her gaze sweeping the moss-draped trees. The time for remedies was over. And in a quiet, book-lined apartment in Chicago, 72-year-old Arthur, Professor, Hayes, a retired university librarian known for his meticulous cataloging and quiet demeanor, noticed a specific, out-of-place advertisement in the classifieds of an obscure academic journal he still subscribed to, a coded message disguised as a request for a rare manuscript, seeking Nightingale's first song, Urgent, for Washington's collection. The professor adjusted his glasses, his heart giving a little flutter it hadn't in decades. The ghosts were being summoned. These were the last of the Nightingale Singh's operatives, a unit so deniable it had never officially existed. They were trained to be invisible, to solve problems others couldn't, or wouldn't. Age had weathered them, but the core of who they were, intensely loyal, incredibly skilled, remained untouched. Marcus's call was not a request, it was an activation. Back in New Liberty City, Captain Rostova was drowning in a sea of official obfuscation. A curt, untraceable call from someone claiming to be Mr. Smith from Interdepartmental Oversight had strongly advised her that the Washington matter is a legacy internal affair and that any further attempts to probe Marcus Washington's background would have significant and unfortunate career repercussions. The message was clear: stand down, or be steamrollered. The digital footprint of Marcus Washington, already almost non-existent, was now being actively erased. Even the minimal hospital admission records were showing strange glitches, data fields corrupting. It was as if the system itself was trying to make him a phantom. Officer Miller, meanwhile, was descending into a spiral of paranoia. Placed on indefinite leave, he felt like a pariah. His calls to his union rep were met with vague promises and non-committal answers. He'd heard whispers around the precinct: Ghost Protocol, National Security, stay away from this one. He didn't understand what it meant, but the fear was a cold knot in his gut. He'd shot a kid, and instead of a straightforward internal affairs investigation, he was caught in something vast and shadowy. He started drinking heavily, jumping at every unexpected noise. His arrogance had curdled into a desperate, hunted fear. He was no longer the hunter, he was the prey. The city, which had once felt like his domain, now seemed filled with unseen eyes, judging him, waiting. The retribution wasn't loud or violent, not in the way Officer Miller might have expected. It was a slow, suffocating constriction. Anonymous tips, backed by irrefutable evidence, began to surface, targeting not just Miller, but a small, insulated clique of officers at the 3rd Precinct known for their aggressive tactics and a string of suspiciously dismissed complaints. An old, forgotten security tape from a holding cell, showing Miller and another officer mocking and lightly assaulting a handcuffed suspect, suddenly appeared in the inbox of a determined investigative journalist at the New Liberty City Chronicle. The timestamp was 3 years old. The original report had claimed no usable footage. Then, detailed financial records, meticulously tracing undeclared income to Miller from a local, security consultation firm, a known front for extorting protection money from small businesses, were anonymously delivered to the Internal Affairs Division, CC to the DA's office. The source was untraceable, the data packets routed through a dozen encrypted international servers. Captain Rostova watched it unfold with a mixture of professional horror and a grudging, uneasy respect for the unseen force at work. She knew this wasn't standard whistleblowing. This was targeted, surgical, and impeccably timed. She received no direct communication from Marcus Washington, yet his presence loomed over everything. The ghosts were cleaning house, using the system's own buried secrets against it. Miller cracked. The psychological pressure, the sudden unearthing of his past misdeeds, the cold shoulder from the department, and the gnawing fear of what else might be revealed, broke him. He started missing IAD interviews, his lawyer quit citing irreconcilable differences, and he was spotted ranting incoherently in a downtown bar. The ultimatum, when it came, wasn't delivered to Miller, but to Captain Rostova, and not by Marcus directly. A single, plain envelope was left on her car windshield. Inside, a flash drive. It contained one file, pristine, unedited bodycam footage from Miller's own camera from the day of the shooting, footage that had somehow been corrupted in the initial evidence log. It clearly showed Sarah holding her tablet, smiling, just before Miller yelled and fired. It also captured Miller's immediate, panicked utterance to Ramirez, "Oh God, I screwed up. We gotta say she lunged." There was also a simple, typed note, "Justice for Sarah. No more lies. You have 24 hours to act, or the full unedited file goes public. Make the right choice, Captain." There was no signature. Rostova felt a chill. This was it. She had been given the means to ensure accountability, and a clear timeline. She knew this was Marcus's invisible hand, offering her a chance to let the system, however flawed, deliver a measure of justice. Failure to do so would mean an uncontrollable public firestorm. She made her choice. Armed with the new, undeniable evidence from the flash drive and the already compiled corruption charges, she went to the district attorney. Within hours, Officer Miller was arrested, not just for the shooting of Sarah Washington, but for a litany of other charges including assault, extortion, and obstruction of justice. The DA, facing an election year and sensing the tide, promised a thorough investigation into the 3rd precinct. Sarah Washington, after weeks in the hospital, was finally discharged, her arm in a sling, a long road of physical therapy ahead, but alive and resilient. Marcus and Eleanor took her home, their relief palpable but quiet. Marcus never spoke of the events that had led to Miller's arrest. He resumed his quiet life, the unassuming old man, the loving grandfather. But there was a new depth in his eyes, a knowledge that the ghosts of his past, once awakened, had ensured that justice, in its own shadowy way, had been served. The city moved on, but for those few who knew a fraction of the truth, the legend of the specter who walked among them would linger, a silent promise that some lines, once crossed, would awaken forces best left undisturbed. Marcus Washington's path was one of quiet resolve, a testament to a father's fierce love and a past that refused to stay buried. When the system falters, what does true justice demand? And what happens when the forgotten skills of an old soldier are the only thing standing against corruption? What are your thoughts on Marcus's actions and the justice served? Share your opinions in the comments below. If this story of silent strength and determination resonated with you, please hit the like button. Help this story reach others by clicking share. And don't forget to subscribe to your channel name for more original thrillers and tales of hidden power. Your support inspires more stories like this one. Thank you for joining us on this journey.